fallacies, enigmas, building up the people, tearing down stigmas, clothed with a purpose. When life tries to wear on me, pray and read the word, but I still go to therapy. No matter your past or what you've been through, this is a space, not judgmental. We got some things to get into. I got my mind in on my meds. No matter your past or what you've been through, this is a space, not judgmental. We got some things to get into. I got my mind in on my mental. Mind in my mental. Mind in my mental. Mind in my mental. Mind in my mental health. Mind in my mental. Mind in my mental. Mind in my mental health.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today is Thursday, September the 4th, and I hope you are having an amazing day. My name is Tenitra Williams, and I am your host for Minding My Mental Health. If you have been with me before, you already know what I want you to do. I want you to hashtag live. Let me know where you are watching from. If you are new, again, welcome. Share this video. Do me a favor, share this video to groups you are a part of, to your page, to your story, because today we are going to talk about some stuff and we are going to get into this, right? I'm so excited to have you guys. Again, I want you to hashtag live. Let me know where you're watching from. Also tag your friends and family. Hey, Chandra. Hey, Courtney. Chandra, I caught the last of your live just a few minutes ago. Great job. And I'm hoping people will sign up, and I'm going to actually look into the class myself because I think it's going to be some great information. So again, if you are here, go ahead, share this broadcast. Today, we are talking about mental health myths, right? And so one of the things that I'm so thankful for because of this broadcast, but so many broadcasts like this, I think mental health, the stigma of mental health has started to be torn down. And so that is a great thing. Go ahead and put some hearts and fire in the comments for that, because it's not so stigmatized when you say, hey, maybe have you considered therapy? People are a little more open to the idea. In fact, I would dare say in some circles, it's actually trendy. You hear people very thankful, very happy, openly talking about their mental health, mental wellness therapy journey, right? And so that is great. Of course, there's still some stigma in some areas, but for the most part, that's, I think overall that's being torn down. Now, here's what that brings though, because once people start talking about things, that opens the door for misinterpretation, misunderstanding, abuse of mental health terms, weaponizing mental health terms. And so that's really what I want to do today. Get on here today and talk about. And we're just going to explore maybe 5 or 6. I think I have 6 on my papers, but I'm not sure. Some myths that people think are valid, but really, if you hear them, you're able to see how they are not actually helpful to us. Hey, Larome, good to see you on here. I hope you are able to stay on it and catch it all. So again, today, we're going to explore some mental health related myths that sound helpful. They sound accurate, but they actually may be causing you some harm. Continue to share, continue to tag. Thank you guys for joining. So many people believe all the myths that they hear about mental health because it sounds pretty clinical, right? And so we want to look at these from an actual clinician to see, is this actually healthy? I actually see people saying things on social media now, and they'll say things like, my therapist said, and then it'll be followed by something that is not very therapeutic. Hey, LD, thank you. I'd love to have another therapist on board. You can back me up or check me if you hear me say something wrong, right? But again, I love to talk about this type of thing because I think mental health is obviously something we need to talk about in our community, but we want to make sure that we're getting the right information to our community as well. So, the first thing we're going to talk about, or the first myth that a lot of people have when it comes to mental health, is about boundaries. And one of the things that people believe about boundaries is that boundaries are telling other people what they can and cannot do. Boundaries are That's not what a boundary actually is. A boundary is not telling people what they can and can't do. A boundary is establishing for yourself what you will and will not accept. Okay? I'm going to say that again. A boundary is not about telling other people what they can and cannot do, because we do not have the power to control other people. A boundary is something that you establish to determine what you will and will not accept. That can be a boundary for yourself. That can be a boundary for yourself in the sense of, I will not eat these types of foods because I will not accept the unhealthy benefits. That can also be a boundary of, I will not stay in a relationship where people call me out of my name, right? Those are boundaries. You cannot stop the other person from calling you a name. You can stop yourself from being in that relationship. Does that make sense? Let me know. I want to hear from you guys. I want you talking back to me today. So a boundary is not telling someone, don't call me after 10 o'clock. That sounds like a boundary. Doesn't that sound good? And like, hey, I'm establishing my boundaries. Don't call me after 10 o'clock. Don't text me before 7 a.m. These sound like boundaries, but what they are is you trying to tell somebody else what to do. Now, how would you word that? Instead of saying, don't call me after 10, you can say, I don't accept phone calls after 10 p.m. So if you call me, I think it would be better for you to wait. I would prefer, and I'm asking that you wait until, the next day. However, if you call me at 10, I will not respond to that call. I will not respond to that text message if it's after 10 p.m. That is a boundary. That's you saying, this is how I'm going to respond, regardless of what someone else says. People have to understand. And let's talk about why this is problematic. This is problematic because when people believe that boundaries are about controlling other people, they often start getting into this space of demanding, right? You're not going to do this to me. You're going to do this. And really it happens is you get into a power struggle with other people, and you go back and forth. And then it's, you say I'm going to do this, or you can't do that. Right. Well, ultimately, again, you can't tell other people what they can do. Thinking of a boundary as controlling other people also breeds guilt and shame, because if you think of a boundary as bossing people around, that can often feel selfish, that can feel mean, and sometimes it will cause people to not actually stand in the boundary they want for themselves because they don't want to be mean, they don't want to be selfish. It can destroy relationships instead of protecting them. Boundaries are healthy. Put that in the comments. Boundaries are healthy. The problem is, if we don't understand what a boundary is, we will just walk around frustrated because we will feel like other people are not respecting our boundaries, and we will feel like we don't have any power in that situation. And that misunderstanding often causes people to feel helpless rather than empowered. A boundary is actually very empowering, but if you don't understand that it's not about telling other people what to do, it's about what you will accept, you will stay in a situation that violates your boundaries, but you will just keep fussing and complaining about other people violating your boundary. And so then you just become the victim, and ultimately you are empowered to do something different. The lack or this misunderstanding of boundaries can destroy relationships instead of protecting them. Misused boundaries become power struggles. So instead of saying, here's what you will and won't do, it's about saying, here's what I will and will not accept. It keeps people stuck in the cycle of resentment. I think that's so important, because if I tell you don't hit me and you keep hitting me, and I keep saying, I then start resenting you, and I get very angry at you, and I don't understand why, if you love me, why won't you, quote unquote, respect my boundaries? But the question is not why won't they respect my boundary? The question is, why am I not respecting my own boundary? Okay. So instead of saying you don't hit me, you say, you know what? I'm not going to stay connected to someone who is going to be abusive. The truth, boundaries aren't controlling others. They are defining our own limits, and they help us to stay emotionally safe and whole. Okay. So again, just one last example, because I do want to make sure that we understand this. Instead of telling someone, don't yell at me, a true boundary is not telling them not to yell at you. A true boundary says, if you continue to yell at me, I am going to leave this conversation. If you continue to raise your voice, I'm going to leave this conversation. But what happens? We start yelling back at someone else and telling them not to yell at us as we're yelling at them to tell them not to yell at us, right? So the myth is harmful because it turns boundaries into weapons rather than tools for healthy communication and connection. Boundaries are not about controlling others, they are about controlling you. So change your thinking from if you love me, you'd respect my boundaries to since I love me, I will respect my boundaries. So change your thinking from if you love me, you would respect my boundaries to because I love me, I will respect my own boundaries. Okay. So that's myth number one. I'm the myth buster today. So that first myth was boundaries are about telling people what they can and can't do. That is a myth. That is not true. Myth number two. This is a good one. I think this one's really powerful, and yes, you see it a lot. Other people should walk on eggshells around my triggers. Okay, I'm pause and let you think about that one. Other people should walk on eggshells around my triggers. Okay. Now, why does this sound believable? It sounds believable because if you've ever been hurt, it feels like protecting yourself, right? So if you've been hurt, it feels protective. It feels like you're expecting other people to avoid anything that makes us uncomfortable. Social media sometimes frames protecting your peace as requiring everybody to change their behavior around you. Again, we talked about that in the first myth. You can't control other people. All you can control is what you accept. Why is this harmful? It makes healing dependent on how other people carefully tiptoe around subjects around you instead of empowering you to build resilience. I'm going to say that again. It makes healing dependent on other people uh, being cautious and tiptoeing around. Don't say that around her. You know, she's going to be upset. You know, that's going to trigger her. Instead of that, it doesn't allow you to actually build your own resilience. Okay. It creates fragile relationships ultimately because people can't be honest with you because everything they're afraid of what's going to trigger you. And relationships that where everyone is walking around on eggshells is not a strong, firm relationship because it doesn't have that foundation of authenticity and truth. In order for relationships to be healthy, they have to have they need to have a foundation of authenticity and truth. Friends, partners, and coworkers feel anxious about saying the wrong thing, which can lead to disconnection or distance or even arguments. So again, I think it's really important that we understand that triggers are not about or you feeling uncomfortable is not about other people tiptoeing. You have to learn how to deal with that your own discomfort. What happens when we believe this boundary that other people should tiptoe around things that we're uncomfortable talking with? It often leads us to stay unhealed with these wounds. If you avoid everything that doesn't feel good, you never develop the tools to calm your nervous system, to process emotions, and reframe your thoughts. I'm going to say that again, it's very powerful. If you avoid every conversation, everything that doesn't feel good, if you avoid everything that may even be a trigger, you never develop the skills to calm your nervous system, to learn how to process through conflict. You don't learn how to reframe your thinking. And so ultimately, you are losing power when you don't exercise your resilient skills, right? So the trigger is not just being annoyed. And I think this is really, really important. We're going to get into it a little later, the next myth actually. A trigger is not just being annoyed, it's something that activates a trauma response. While loved ones can support you with compassion, you are responsible for learning how to navigate your triggers in a healthy way. I'm going to say that again. You are responsible to learn how to navigate your emotions, things that trigger you, things that cause you discomfort in a healthy way. It is not other people's responsibility to navigate those things. Okay. We get upset. I remember the day my grandmother died in fifth grade, I still went to school that day because I figured, what was I going to do all day except probably sit around the house and cry? If I went to school, my mind would be on other things. So My mom gave me the choice. I went to school, and someone actually said something about a grandmother dying. They were not talking about my grandmother dying, who had just died that morning, but someone said something about a grandmother dying. And I was so upset. Why would they say that? Well, obviously, I was in fifth grade, but emotionally, I wasn't mature enough to recognize that person has a right to say whatever they want to say. I have to manage that. And so I had to kind of sit with, why did he say something about a grandma today? I don't know if he knew that my grandmother had passed away that morning. He may have, he may not have. I don't know. But the point is, I can't expect other people to say, let's not talk about things because she may or may not have experienced something in her life. Even if your friends and family know that you are experiencing something. If you went through a divorce and it's a really tough time for you, that doesn't mean that if you go out for a girls' night, nobody can mention the word divorce. That doesn't mean that nobody can talk about infidelity if you experienced infidelity in your relationship. That doesn't mean people can't be mindful of that, right? But it does mean that it is not their responsibility. The responsibility lies with us. Sometimes that feels harsh for people, but the truth is, it's very empowering, because when you learn how to navigate, calm your nervous system, reframe your thinking, process your emotions in a healthy way, you are better for doing that. Okay. All right. So the topic, instead of saying, don't talk about that around me, don't say that around me, what you can say is, this topic is actually really hard for me right now. And I'm working on how to respond to it. So if I pause for a minute, just please be patient with me. Or, hey, I may kind of zone out on this conversation because I'm still kind of processing my own feelings about it. But I'm not trying to control anyone, right? So you're explaining to people, I have to practice my own self-care. I have to do that myself. Okay. This myth is harmful because it turns your healing into everyone else's job. True freedom comes when we learn to manage our own emotions, and not when other people tiptoe around them. Okay. Any questions or comments about either one of these first two myths that we have here? So the first myth was that boundaries are telling people what they can and can't do. That's a myth. The second myth is other people should walk on eggshells about my triggers. The third myth ties right into that second myth. It's also about triggers. This is so important. Feeling uncomfortable means I am triggered. Okay, that is a myth. I want to come and dispel or bust that myth. Just because you feel uncomfortable does not mean you are triggered. Put that in the comment section. Feeling uncomfortable does not mean you are triggered. Now, I want to explain the difference between feeling triggered and feeling uncomfortable. Okay. Social media often uses the terms triggered as really a shorthand for I'm offended or I'm uncomfortable. Okay. So when we hear the word trigger, sometimes if it's I'm uncomfortable with that or I'm offended with that, that bothers me, we'll say it's a trigger warning. Okay. What is the difference between upset and triggered? Well, both both the discomfort and triggers can create strong emotions, and people will lump them together. But here's actually some things that we need to see why it's so harmful. It actually changes the clinical definition. So, and I know you guys aren't all clinicians, but let me talk about it for just stay with me for a minute. A trigger is not just feeling irritated. It's not just being annoyed. It's when your sensory cues, your sound, your smell, your physical cues are activated to a trauma response in your brain. Okay. So that includes a flashback, disassociation, panic attack, extreme fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses. So what do I mean? When you are truly triggered, there are some things that happen in your body where almost your system gets hijacked, your amygdala gets hijacked, and it's like, oh my gosh, she's triggered. So that's why you will see people, if you see veterans with PTSD, often if they hear that shot, it's not like they go, ooh, that makes me uncomfortable. When they hear the fireworks on the 4th of July, now many have worked through it, but I'm talking about those who are actively still having these symptoms. When they are triggered, they may go back and have a flashback. And for them, they are back at the war, right? That is very different from someone saying something that you don't want to hear. Okay. So it minimizes people who are actually struggling with real, um, survive PTSD symptoms or complex trauma. It minimizes that because everything, oh my gosh, girl, I walked in and the room was dirty and I was triggered because my mama used to. That is not a trigger. You are uncomfortable, but that we're not. We have to stop saying everything is a trigger. Why is this even problematic? You may go, Nitra, it feels like you're being picky. You're nitpicking things. Let me explain why that is problematic. The reason that's problematic is because it keeps people from real growth. Labeling normal discomfort as a trigger can encourage people to avoid rather than building tolerance to help them learn how to deal with healthy stress in a healthy way. Okay. So because you say, oh, I'm triggered, I don't want to do that. Oh my gosh, it's triggering. Things may act there are real triggers, right? I don't want to minimize that. I want to say everything that is uncomfortable is not a trigger. And the reason that's problematic is because we say that everything that's uncomfortable is a trigger, it can cause and encourage people to avoid things that we need to be confronting so that we can build our resilience. Does that make sense? Let me know. Y'all talk to me. Does that make sense? So, discomfort, your nervous system is stretched. Okay, hear this. I want you guys to hear the difference between a trigger and discomfort. In discomfort, your nervous system is stretched, but still manageable. So, an example may be your boss calls you in for a tough conversation and says you need to tighten up on some areas. You don't want to hear that. You don't like it, but you're okay. You're able to function, right? A trigger, your nervous system has been hijacked by past trauma, leading to intense physical or emotional reactions that feel unsafe. Um, and so, again, both of these matter, but they're not the same. They both matter, but they're not the same. The way he raised his voice instantly took me back to childhood trauma. That could be a trigger. The way something happened and you're like, ooh, oh my gosh. I couldn't move for a while because I was still that kid standing there in front of my father with the belt before he abused me or whatever, right? So discomfort can be a place for growth. Put that in there. Discomfort can be a place for growth. Triggers are invitations for healing trauma. Discomfort can be a place of growth where triggers are saying, hey, I still have some healing that needs to be taking place. Misusing the word trigger is harmful because it can confuse the two and block people from understanding they need coping skills versus when they need trauma informed care, because they are different. Discomfort doesn't mean you're triggered. And going back to the other myth, it also doesn't mean other people have to walk on eggshells, because dealing with things that make you uncomfortable, or even if it is actual a trigger, even if it's a real trigger, it's still your responsibility to learn. Go find someone who is a trauma informed therapist that can help you with that. Okay. Um, myth number four. Myth number four. Oh, this is one. And go ahead if you've ever said it or you've seen it used all out of context. The healthiest way. This myth number four is the healthiest way to protect my peace is to cut people off. Go ahead, raise your hand if you've heard people say something similar. I was just recently, as I was creating um, my notes for today, I heard someone say, um, if they don't like your status, cut them off. If they like your friend status and they go past your status, cut them off. If they don't celebrate you on so and so, cut. I mean, it was just a list of things of this person saying cut them off. And I saw people, girl, yeah, that's, you know, guess what? You're gonna be lonely if you are cutting everybody off all the time. So cutting off this is why it sounds believable. And for a lot of people, it can even sound clinical. I'm not saying that there is not a time or a place to actually cut people off. I just don't think everything requires a cutoff. So let's dig a little bit. Cutting off can feel like it's a way of controlling. Cutting off can feel like, hey, that's my boundary. She said I can't control them, so I'm just going to cut myself off from the situation, right? So again, this is where we get pop culture mixing in with psychology, and they kind of convolute some of the teachings. It can feel like I'm establishing my boundary. But sometimes when you're cutting off people all the time without actually working through what's going on, what you're actually doing is avoiding. And you're oftentimes showing that you lack real conflict resolution skills and sometimes emotional maturity. Cutting off can feel like a quick relief, and it can even feel like safety. Hey, if they didn't do so and so, I'll cut them off. If they said this about me or they didn't say this about me, I'll cut them off, right? Without actually saying, let me explore what's going on in my body. Let me explore why I felt uncomfortable with that situation. Also, is there something that I may be missing about this situation before I just start cutting off everybody? Okay. So social media glorifies the cutoff culture. Social media glorifies that. And they say, girl, that's just self care. It can be, but again, if it's out of balance, it can be very unhealthy. One of the problems with this is everything is labeled as toxic. If someone doesn't like your status, if some cut them off. If someone doesn't buy your book, cut them off. If someone didn't say happy birthday to you on social media, cut them off. I saw someone say, okay, my birthday was very recently. What day was it? Last Wednesday was my birthday. Yes, last Wednesday was my birthday. Love my birthday. I got a lot, and I do mean a lot of social media happy birthdays. I appreciated each and every one of them. However, I don't know if I got to say thank you to everybody. I tried. If I missed you, thank you very much. Now, what I was saying is there are people that I've seen people say when it's someone's birthday, I look back, I go back to see if they said happy birthday to me before I say happy birthday to them. That takes a lot of energy. And with the number of people that said happy birthday to me, it is quite possible that I missed someone. And so if I had that mentality, if they didn't say it to me, I'm not going to say it to them. That's going to keep me in a very, very narrow place. And I'm opening the door for resentment that really isn't necessary, because the truth of the matter is there are people who said happy birthday to me that don't know anything about me. My name popped up on the thing that said it was my birthday. They simply said, click happy birthday. And it is what it is, right? And so maybe someone wasn't on social media on your birthday. That doesn't mean that they were actively on a vendetta to get you or to hate on you. We have to stop centering ourselves in everyone's life. Toxic has become synonymous when we aren't centered in someone else's world. People don't always see the same thing on their timeline. It is a lot, Kim. It's a lot. I was like, whoa, that you are asking to be to walk in resentment. You're asking to walk in offense when you have that type of mindset. Again, people don't always see the same thing on social media. So just because a friend um, liked someone else's status and they didn't like your status, they may not have even saw your status yet. Give them a few days. There are things that I see for the first time, and if you look back, it'll say it was posted 3 days ago. So when we get into this mentality that if I don't see this if I don't see it a certain way, that is a reason to cut people off. As I said earlier, what will happen is you will find yourself in a very lonely space, a very lonely space. And here's the other part: not only will you find yourself in a lonely space, you will actually find yourself drawn to other people who have that same mentality. And then it will become a very, very ugly, self-centered, dark place, because everyone's kind of in a tit for tat kind of space for attention. And so if you surround yourself with that, it will make your global world look like everyone is pretty much trifling, because you surrounded yourself with those types of people. So make sure that you are not falling into the myth that everything has to be cut off. Okay. Again, why? Because some of the best connections come when you learn how to work through conflict. I see two of my soul shifts sisters on here today, Kimberly Dennis and Courtney Barnes. If I believe that Courtney said something that I didn't like, a part of me, my maturity, if I value relationships, or specifically that relationship, I don't go to Kim and say, well, I think Courtney was talking about me, or I'm just going to cut Courtney off. What I do is I say, you know what, Courtney, I read that and I didn't know if that was about me. Can we talk about it? And give her the opportunity to say if that's about me or not. Or I could just assume I haven't done anything to Courtney. Why would I make the assumption that I can just say, I haven't done anything. Why would I make the assumption that her status was about me? Again, we have to uncenter ourselves, and we have to recognize that certain things can actually be worked through. If you know anything about me, y'all know I love my husband. I love him. I love him. I think he's wonderful. I think he was made for me and all that good stuff, right? Well, here's the thing. That doesn't mean we get along all the time. That doesn't mean we see things the exact same way, or that we don't disagree about things. We don't have different viewpoints. If we live in that cutoff thing, we're quick to walk away from relationships, build walls in relationships, rather than saying, okay, I disagree, let's talk through this, let's talk about it. Why? Because if I learn how to do that, when conflict comes, it actually builds a stronger relationship, because the relationship feels like I can handle some tough stuff, right? But if you're cutting off everybody all the time, you don't even know if you can handle something tough. So you have to learn how to build your conflict resolution skills rather than cutting off everybody. So it is a myth that the best way to protect your peace is to just cut everybody off. Again, if someone is truly abusive to you, physically, emotionally, financially, you have a right to cut that person off, or at least stand in your boundaries of, hey, I'm going to keep a relationship with someone if they do certain things, but I'm not going to allow this thing, right? And so establishing healthy boundaries, which are for you and not the other person, remember, that can help you. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about why this is harmful. A little bit more about this part. This cutting everybody off blocks emotional maturity. It keeps you from working through conflict, as we said. It leads to shallow relationships, we talked about. It can also be a mask for avoidance, because you don't know have the skills, or you have some emotional stuff that makes you uncomfortable. So rather than building deep connections, rather than healing from certain things that you need to heal from, you just cut people off. That's why, oh, this is good. This is why so many people think the cutoff culture is so powerful, because they say, I have so much peace now that I cut all of these people out of my life. Again, there are certain people that may not need to be around you, but they'll say that because they're not actually ever confronted with anything, which means they are actually not growing. And so we can all feel like we're amazing when we're in a bubble. Okay. You can feel like everything you do is golden when you are in your bubble of isolation, but when you get around other people, that's where you get to see the emotional growth, or sometimes the emotional stagnation, the immaturity. You have to be around people to even know if you're growing, right? You have to be able to say, you know what, that person said something last year that really rubbed me the wrong way. This year they said something very similar, and it didn't bother me the same way. I didn't handle it the same way. I'm growing, right? And so isolation can be very dangerous, and it diminishes true cases of danger. There again, like I said, there are times for you to cut off abuse, repeated violations, or unsafe people, but overusing it makes it harder for people to truly know what's dangerous and when to be things to be taken serious. Cutting off should be one of the last resorts, not your very first move. Okay, again, it is an option, but it should not be your number one option every time you feel uncomfortable, every time someone challenges you, because I promise you, I would not have the growth in my life that I do experience if I just separated every time someone challenged me. In fact, if you really want to grow, I'm talking about healthy people challenging you now. But when people challenge you, lean into that. Lean into when they are challenging you, and not go, oh, she always finding something wrong. No, lean into that, right? It's an opportunity for you to grow. Okay. So your takeaway is the myth is harmful because it tricks us into thinking that peace is the absence of people who hurt us, when in reality, peace often comes when we are learning to repair and grow together. Peace is not the absence of people who hurt us, because even people you love can hurt you. Your spouse can hurt you. Your friend can hurt you. Hopefully, it would not be intentional, right? But just being humans, we have the potential to disappoint or hurt each other. It's not about not being around people who hurt you. What it is about is learning how to deal with that hurt in a healthy way. All right, here's another myth. Do y'all have any questions about any of this stuff? Let me know. Again, I want to hear from you. Any comments or questions? Myth number 5, healing means I won't struggle with that thing again. Myth number 5, healing means I'll never struggle with that again. Whatever your that is, that is a myth. Just because you are, when we hear the word, we say healed, ED, And most of the time we say what? That's past tense, which means it's done, it's over, it's finished. Well, that doesn't always mean the same thing when you're talking about mental health and growth. Um, so, healing means you recover faster, you have tools, and you don't spiral like you used to. You still may face triggers, but you respond differently. Here's a physical example. So, when I had my daughter, I had a C section. Okay. According to the charts and all of that, the typical physical recovery time for a C section is 6 to 8 weeks. I had a typical recovery process. So, everything, my incision, all of that healed just wonderfully. It healed great, right? On the outside, there were no complications. So within 6 to 8 weeks, according to the medical professionals, I was fine. I was healed. I was in recovery. I was in full recovery. Now, here is the truth. I could feel things in my body that were not the same for over a year after that. And so I looked it up and I was like, why? I know I'm fine and I know this is a whatever. Why do I still feel that? Well, I learned that there's a sensitivity in a healed C-section scar area that even years later is common, and it's due to regrowing nerves becoming hypersensitive and trapped of nerves by scar tissue, or the formation of tension and stiffness in the tissues around the scar. Now, why is that important? I was healed, but there were still things in my body that was being restored. So just because something may actually be uncomfortable or indeed trigger you, just because something you feel something one way or whatever doesn't mean that you are not healed, right? It so because sometimes what will happen is that people will get really frustrated with the process because they will say, I thought I was healed. And yet when I saw this thing happen, I felt I felt upset again. It doesn't Healing doesn't mean an absence of emotion. Now, there can be, watch this, there can be there's stories in my past that when I would tell those particular stories, I would cry. I would feel the emotion of it, right? Now, when I tell the exact same stories, I do not have that same emotional response. And I used to think, well, that means I'm totally healed because I can share that story without an emotional response. But I can also tell the story and recognize that was actually very dirty. Someone did me poorly, or I did someone else poorly, or whatever. I feel glad that I'm not in that, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean just because there's not an emotional response that you are healed, because a lot of people don't have emotional response and they are actually still in need of healing. They have turned off their emotions to such a degree that they can tell. I've had clients come in and tell stories of horrific abuse. Their face never sheds a tear. Their countenance never changes. They've actually become numb to it. Now, when they actually start feeling their emotions, they are actually starting that healing process. So I want us to understand that just because something feels doesn't mean that we aren't healed, or just because we can feel doesn't mean we aren't healed. But there are those times where you go, girl, that doesn't even bother me. I have total ability to share that, and not it doesn't bring up that same thing. Okay. Someone healed from people pleasing still may be tempted at times when something comes up to start people pleasing, but they'll go, nope, that's not what we do anymore. We do what's best for us. So I'm going to walk away. That temptation doesn't mean that they weren't healed. Why is that important? Because people will give up if they start to believe that. Man, I was tempted to do this, so I'm never going to get it right. No, I want you to be encouraged. The fact that you were able to recognize, hey, I'm tempted to people please, or I'm tempted to um, give to my sister, even though I know that's not the best decision for me right now. That temptation doesn't mean you're not healed. The fact that you recognize the temptation, the fact that you paused and said, I'm going to do something different that is actually healthy for me, is the indication that you are on the right path. Okay. Does that make sense? Healing is not the absence of pain, it's the presence of resilience. Put that in the comments. Healing is not the absence of pain, it's the presence of resilience. Let's look at myth number 6. Myth number 6 is my diagnosis is my identity. My diagnosis is my identity. This sounds believable. It sounds like it could be scientific. However, we're going to break it down as to why that is not true. Getting a diagnosis for a lot of people is a very positive moment. And when I say that, I mean they feel like they finally have some answers to things that they've been wondering what's going on with them. So if, for example, you've been having pain in your leg for the past 3 weeks and you've looked on the internet and nothing seems to be changing, and you go to the doctor and they go, oh, it's so and so, and this is your diagnosis. And now what you need to do is this in order to get your leg where it's no longer in pain. You feel relieved at the diagnosis because the diagnosis gave you an understanding of a path to treatment. Okay, so that is really what a diagnosis is for. It's to give language to someone so that they can have a clearer path to treatment. It is not for us to for it to become our identity. Getting a diagnosis, again, can feel satisfying because it can name your struggle and validate your experience. I'm not crazy. I really had these things happening, and oh, that makes so much sense. That's what was going on, right? It organizes symptoms in a recognized pattern so that you're not left wondering what's wrong with me. So instead of I'm just lazy, a diagnosis may go, oh, my chemicals were out of balance. And so that was showing up as depression. That's why I was always tired and didn't have a lot of motivation. It wasn't a character flaw. So it can give you some understanding of why you're responding the way you're responding. But the goal is not for you to say, oh, that's why that's happening. Now I'm just going to stay there. That's not the goal of a diagnosis. The diagnosis is to guide evidence-based treatment. The goal is to guide treatment, not to identify where you have to be the rest of your life. I would not have gotten into this field if it was just about diagnosing people and watch them stay stuck. You can get a diagnosis and learn, okay, how does this affect how I move forward? Okay. So they help providers, myself included, choose right interventions. Oh, okay, maybe there's medication needed. Oh, maybe there's talk therapy. Maybe there's talk therapy and medication. Maybe you just need more vitamins. Maybe there's this. Maybe there's that. It helps you to understand kind of, again, the best path for treatment. Insurance companies require diagnosis oftentimes with medical professionals before they will pay. So that's another reason why people have diagnosis or give diagnosis. A diagnosis creates common language between professionals so that they can understand what's going on. And so if there needs to be treatment between various professionals, they can say, this is what's happening, so that another professional can come in and go, oh, okay. Now, there can be misdiagnosis, which again is all the more reason why you don't want to be so tied to a diagnosis, because what if you're misdiagnosed and you're going around claiming things that actually aren't even necessarily true? Oftentimes, when you're looking at culture, things that are Black people are diagnosed with are not the same thing they would diagnose someone else with. If you have a child that, and I'm kind of going off on a tangent just for a second, but stick with me. You can have two children in the classroom. And I've seen this myself. I went to observe one time a family member was having some behavioral issues in class. And so I went to observe. And what I saw was not so much the behavior of the family member. What I saw was how the teacher responded to the Black male students in that class. I saw with my own eyes things that other students were doing, that when a Black male student did the same thing, she would respond to them in a more aggressive, punitive way, where she, even if it was a Black girl, oftentimes she would say, sit down, have a seat, She was a little more gentle. But when it was a Black male student, we got a very different, or I saw a very different reaction. And so, again, if she were diagnosing, and if there is a bias in her head, her diagnosis of a Black male student may be different than she would diagnose a student of a different color or a different gender. So, it's important that we don't just assume an identity of a diagnosis. We say, okay, this is what I've been diagnosed with. This is to help guide the treatment or how I move forward. What a diagnosis is not, it's not your identity. It's not a reason to stay stuck in negative behaviors. It's not a permanent label for you the rest of your life. Okay? I need us to, it's not your identity. It's not an excuse to stay stuck where you are, and it does not have to be a permanent label for your life. It is a map, not a name tag. It's a map, not a name tag. Okay? A diagnosis, it shows you where you are and it helps you to find a path forward. It doesn't define the whole of who you are. If you, and I think, I tell people, I use this example all the time. Sometimes we will allow shame to keep us from identifying where we are. But if we don't know where we are, it's hard to tell you how to get somewhere. So if you say, give me directions to your house, I have to ask you, where are you now? Okay. How do I get to your house? I cannot tell you how to get to my house if I don't know where you are now. That is a good, I guess, way to frame diagnosis. Shows me where I am now. And it also helps me to be able to get instruction to how to get somewhere else. Okay. So I think that is really important. And those are some myths that we have to stop. So the question is, which one of these myths did you believed in the past? Which one of these myths did you go, ooh, I thought that before, or I still kind of see that in my own life, or this is going to impact how I interact with other people? Because there are just certain things that if we don't challenge them, we will go about again and stay stuck. Why is this diagnosis stuff so important, or not getting stuck in a diagnosis identity? Number one, it limits your growth. So as you guys are talking, I want to just kind of go through some of these things. When you get stuck in your diagnosis as identity, it limits your growth. When you see yourself only as your diagnosis, you stop believing that change is possible. You stop believing in many of the positive things that you have going on in your life. You stop believing things, and you exalt the identity. If you are a believer, you exalt the identity of the diagnosis above what God said about you. It can reinforce stigmas. Oh, that's just my so and so. That's just my whatever. I do that because I'm this. And it gives you an out instead of saying, yes, that is a symptom, but I am working daily to learn how to deal with that. Okay. For example, there are people if let's say bipolar, there are people when they are in a manic phase, they may go shopping and get kind of crazy with their spending, or get I don't want to use that word, spend recklessly, or they may spend without thinking, right? And so instead of saying, if they identify, oh, hey, that's what I do when I'm manic, I'm gonna go and shop, I'm gonna spend all this money, or saying, hey, I've learned, one of the goals that I will have with people if they have that diagnosis, I will say, what I want you to do is to start identifying the signs that you are feeling depressed. Identify the signs when it looks like you may be entering into mania. Why? Because now we're going to do things differently so that you make different choices or have different outcome. So if you say, I'm when I'm going into a manic episode, what will happen is I will start spending. So now they'll say, I noticed I was feeling this way, so I could tell that this is what was happening. So I changed my diet. I gave my credit cards to my husband. I did so and so. And so this time when I was feeling this way, this is how I handled it. And so I didn't sabotage the progress that I'm making because I had maybe some change in my hormones. right? So learning things is really just a path for you to grow and to heal. It's not to be your identity. The truth is, a diagnosis is a tool, it's not your identity, and it's there to serve some purposes: clarity, treatment, and help build community. Clarity, treatment, community. Connection. When I say community, I mean sometimes it's knowing, oh, there are other people that also deal with this. I can learn from them. I can use these people for support. I can use these people to grow. Watch this though. You don't want to get with other people. You don't want to build a community with other people who also use it as their identity, because you'll be tempted to do that. So you want your your community to be people who can be supportive, but also willing to help you to grow. All right. So again, this myth is harmful because it reduces the richness of who you are, and it reduces it down to just a label. You are more than a label. All right. Is there? I know there are all kinds of other myths that I could have covered. I chose not to try to go all over the space. These are some things that I see that can be somewhat common, and I want us to start learning how to really use our information, our education, in a way that helps us and not hinders us. So we're not going to cut off everybody. We're not going to overly identify with the diagnosis. It's not your identity. We are not going to. What were some of the other myths? We're not going to assume that just because I feel uncomfortable that I'm being triggered and I can't deal with it, right? So all of those things. I hope this helped you. Again, let me know what your biggest takeaway from today's broadcast was, and we're going to wrap up. As you are typing that out, I want to share just a couple of announcements with you. You guys already know that I have a practice. If you know of someone who may be needing some mental health work or some coaching, I also do coaching. So I'm a licensed professional counselor, but I'm also a mindset coach. If you know of someone who could benefit, send them my way. Let me pull up my little banner so we can contact me. You can call me at 470-410-9790. Again, that's 470-410-9790. You can also email me at tanitria@gmail. And if you have not signed up for my Celebrating You daily email affirmations, I encourage you to do that. What is this? So for about 5 years, it's still a group, but I had a group where I sent out daily affirmations every day. And so now that is now a subscription. You can receive a daily affirmation every morning to your inbox, or I'm sorry, to your email. And that affirmation gives you a great way to reframe your mindset. It gives you a great jump start to shift your mind, to set your intention in a healthy, positive way. It is only $1.99 a month. So again, that's every morning you get your affirmations. And it's a great way. You can sign up right there with that. If you can't get all of that while it's on the screen, feel free to reach out to me. I would be glad to send you that link to sign up. Again, that's $1.99 a month. You probably spend that and don't even recognize it. And so if you have comments or questions, let me know. And of course, you guys know I want you to go ahead and share this video. Even if you shared it one time, there may be some people that could go back and catch the replay. If you didn't get to, if you came late, go back, catch the replay from the beginning, because I think the more we do this, the more we learn to really get the truth of how to handle our mental health. We're going to be stronger for it. Our goal is to never, yes, $1.99, not $199. Thank you. Thank you so much, Elkie. It is not $199 to get a daily affirmation. It is $1.99. Yes. So thank you for that clarification. So again, I want us to understand that when we learn these things, I'm so glad that mental health has not or has become more prominent in our conversation, but I don't want it to be weaponized. I don't want it to be something that people use to actually keep us from growing, because the purpose of it is to help us to grow. You guys know I will be right back here next Thursday with another episode of Minding My Mental Health. Make sure you join me right here every Thursday, unless if not, I'll usually send out an email or some kind of something that says, hey, we don't have an episode today. But typically I will be here on Thursdays at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you guys so much. Tag someone if you know of someone that could have benefited from this and they weren't able to come. Tag them so they can come back and watch it afterward. Thank you guys, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.
Breaking misconceptions, fallacies, enigmas, building up the people, tearing down stigmas, clothed with a purpose. When life tries to wear on me, pray and read the word, but I still go to therapy. No matter your past or what you've been through, this is a space, not judgmental. We got some things to get into. I got my mind in on my meds. No matter your past or what you've been through, this is a space, not judgmental. We got some things to get into. I got my mind in on my mental. Mind in my mental. Mind in my mental. Mind in my mental health. Mind in my mental. Mind in my mental. Mind in my mental.